For those of you that haven't met, seen, or heard Michael before, Michael Lewis here, he's been involved with photography for some time, and he's been enjoying astrophotography for a shorter amount, but I think photography is almost a lifelong passion for him. And the other thing that's really special about what he's going to share for us tonight is his passion for and the things he's really enjoyed about capturing the night sky. And the technical side of that is, or the little secret is, he works for Adobe for the last 20 years. But I don't know if we ask good questions that he likes responding to, we'll get a subscription membership.
I'll work on that. I'll work on that.
Well, we've got to really earn it here for you, sir. And hey, there's a lot of good work we know going behind the scenes, and probably seeing some of the things you're doing tonight as a reflection of what the company you work for is doing to support us. And without further ado, I want to circle back to give you the control, Michael, and a little bit about passion here.
Yeah. No. Okay. Can you all hear me? Somebody can give me a thumbs up. Awesome. All right. So, and by the way, please feel free to ask me, even if I'm going to cover it later, I don't care. Feel free to ask me questions, because I have not had a chance to even really walk through this. I kind of threw it together, and I hope it all makes sense. It's going to be a little bit like one of those movies nowadays where the person doesn't have a memory, so they kind of jump ahead and backwards in time. And so I'll try to like make it a coherent narrative, but yeah, it may be a little disjointed, so bear with me. So yeah, the only way I could figure out how to kind of talk about this was to say, okay, what was my journey into astrophotography? Because it was kind of it was kind of a weird journey. So first off, as already been mentioned, I love photography. I love cameras. I'm a little bit of a strange bird in that I work for a software company that is known for digital imaging. And through working there, I ended up being really into film photography. And the reason I got really into film photography is in high school, I did film photography, and then photography has been in and out of my life. Yeah, from when I was a little kid. But what got in my adult life, the time that I got into photography was when the first digital cameras were coming out. I think I had a Kodak something digital camera, and I actually found myself wanting to get better at photography, and I realized using a digital camera wasn't the way to do it, because there was too many electronics, there were too many things, too many settings. And I quickly got to this place where I was like, I actually want to understand what I'm doing. I don't want to have the camera making decisions for me. So I went out and I bought myself some film cameras. I have, like you can see here, I have a Hasselblad. I actually have a little Leica. I have a 4x5 view camera for 4x5 film. But then I also do still shoot digital, because I do love the convenience of digital, but I shoot medium format digital. As well as just regular 35mm digital. So I love photography, I love cameras, I love gear. It's why I'm poor, but it makes me happy. So my evolution to that point, my evolution with astrophotography kind of started out, if you look at the top left, there's a barn door, basically a barn door equatorial mount for tracking stars. That thing didn't work at all, but I was at this point of wanting to be really cheap. And I kind of, as time went on, my equipment got bigger and more sophisticated and more complicated. And that leads to some interesting parts of my journey in all of this. So how did it all begin that I got into astrophotography as opposed to photography? Back in 2019, I actually took a trip with some friends to Utah, and it ended up in Moab, and in particular in Arches National Park. And they were photographers who had already done some kind of like nightscape type photography, but I had really never been into it. And I should back up and say, I grew up in Los Angeles, California, in the middle of Los Angeles, California. Stars were not a part of my childhood at all. Like Los Angeles, the air quality there has gotten much better in recent times. But when I was there, it was like the sky was white during the day and there was nothing in it at night. So stars were not something that I was really aware of, that was a part of my life. And so even as I grew up, I just never went out seeking them. So I went on this trip to Moab, and my friends were like, hey, we're going to go take a picture of the Milky Way core. And I was like, cool, what's that? And this is a picture of me taken by my friend as I'm like just amazed and walking around trying to find a spot to take this picture. So I took this picture of the Milky Way in Arches, and the thing that was crazy for me was that it was like, in my memory, it looked just like that. Like the Milky Way was so stark and contrasty, and there it was like a physical presence. And I was just like, what is this thing? Why has no one ever told me about this? And I, like, my mind was blown. I was just immediately in love. And so it kind of led to the next part of my journey, which was that I had Milky Way core fever. I wanted to take a picture of the Milky Way all the time. And so one thing I should point out is, at this point, if you had asked me, if you had pointed at the constellation of Orion and said, what is that? I would have said, I don't know, the Big Dipper. So I was not knowledgeable about, like astronomy at all. But I knew I wanted to take a picture of this amazing thing that I'd seen in Utah. And so I went all up and down the coast of Santa Cruz. And this is all, let me see, is this all Santa Cruz? This is all Santa Cruz.
Can you say exactly where those were taken?
Yeah,
I'm
so
curious.
I mean, some of them are pretty obvious, like there's Shark Fin Cove. The one, let's see, if I start left to right, that is just past Año Nuevo. The next one is driving. It's not, if you drive up one north, it's not, oh man, I'm spacing on the name of the place, but there's actually a beach where you'll see this lagoon, and then the beach, and then the water. And it's, yeah, it'll come to me. I'll say it later when I can think of the name. But then everything else is like Año Nuevo, or there's a Doggy Beach. I don't know what we call it, but by Steamer Lane,
Okay.
and then 4 Mile Beach.
Yeah.
So it's all within 30 minutes of Santa Cruz.
Okay.
And
Nice.
and I was just like, this is amazing. Like, it's so cool. I can't believe like this thing has been there all this time and I haven't been. And it was great because it was getting me out and about. Like, I was going out, I was willing to hike places. My wife teases me because she says that I sold her a false bag of goods, because when we first met, I seemed like I was a really outdoorsy person, but I'm actually not. so like, she was amazed that I was like running and hiking because I was just trying to find places that I could shoot the Milky Way core. So again, keeping in mind that I had very little knowledge of astronomy and the way that stars move, or like, I just hadn't bothered to think about it. This day came where I couldn't shoot the Milky Way anymore. It was gone, and I couldn't believe it. Why would it be gone? Right? And so, but I still really wanted to, but my curiosity was ignited. I was like, wow, like, what else is up there? And so when you when you want to learn something and you want to get better at, what do? You go to YouTube. So I went to YouTube and I was like, what else is up there? How do you get the other things that are up there? And I started finding out about things like, like nebula that you could take pictures of, and other regions of the sky that you could take pictures of. But all of these things were much fainter than the Milky Way core. And so I was like, well, how do you take pictures of them? So I learned about things like star trackers and polar alignment, and then I had to learn about balancing amount so that you would get good, about tracking the stars, because obviously the Earth rotates and the stars seem to move in the sky. So I went on YouTube, and I think I've said, I made a joke at the time. I was like, there should be a term for overconfidence based on watching YouTube videos. Like the feeling that you're an expert because you've watched so many YouTube videos. Oh, I got this. And I definitely, if there's a term for that, I had it. If there's a condition for that, I definitely had it.
Cool.
And so I got myself a star tracker.
Yeah.
And I had a DSLR. And just on my back porch, I started experimenting with trying to take deep sky photographs. And I got to tell you, the number of nights I was on the back porch trying not to set a bad example for my son by swearing as I tried to find, as I tried to star hop to find different targets that I could shoot. It was one of the most frustrating things I've ever done, but it was also one of the most rewarding things I'd ever done, because when I found them and I actually got it, I was just blown away. And as I go forward in this, there will be better pictures, but I have to say, this has been interesting even putting this together, because I went back in time to try and figure out the timeline of how I did all of this. I still do, I love these pictures, because my sense of amazement that there was this much color in the sky was just, I was blown away every time. I had no idea. And it was this sense of like, how could all of this be up there just outside of my perception? I had no idea. So these pictures are just like, I even finding them and to make this presentation, I fell in love with them again, because they're not the prettiest of pictures of these, nebula, but they just mean the world to me, because I remember how inspired I was by them.
Yeah.
So just to show, like, I took this picture of the Rho Ophiuchi cloud complex just last week with the same setup, a star tracker and a DSLR and this was from my driveway.
Yeah. A quick question, Michael. When you talked about star hopping, are you using a Telrad or just a crosshair finder scope, or a little of luck, or all the above?
I was so again, like, it was definitely one of those things of I watched the YouTube video, and it showed me how to find certain very prominent stars or star clusters or star patterns.
Yeah.
And then I used my phone with an app, which is always, it's one of those funny things where you're like, yeah, a phone can do anything. It's like, actually, a phone is not anywhere near accurate enough to get you actually, it'll get you in range of it, but then you're on your own, right? It's like, I'm pointed at the right, 40 degrees of sky, but now what do I do, right? So it was a little bit of everything. It was like a little bit of luck. It was a little bit of, and this is what I should say, is that I think what I do appreciate about using that star tracker, as much of a pain in the butt as it was, is that that's the first time I was able to start recognizing star constellations like Cepheus and sorry, I've had a really long day of like
Cygnus.
Talking today, so yeah, thanks, Cygnus. The one that got me was Pegasus, because I heard that it was like the square in the sky, so I kept looking for a square in the sky. And you start to realize that, like, your sense of you have to understand the perspective of the constellation. So I was looking like this, and I'm like, wait, oh, the square is this big in the sky. I wasn't expecting that. So like it really got my brain oriented towards how to find constellations and star patterns, right? And
fun.
Yeah, it was and then I started driving my wife and son crazy by dragging them out there and being like, there's this thing, and they're like, I just see a lot of dots and it's cold, I'm going back inside. So this is me out at just to like say, like, as with everything in this journey, it's like the thing that I learned was like practice, and knowledge is what gets you better results.
It's pinnacles, right?
Yeah, so this is at Pinnacles, and this is actually the shot that I took. I did a panorama at Pinnacles, the west entrance. And Pinnacles National Park actually featured this photo on their Instagram when they were promoting a recent astronomy event they had there. Then, wah, I actually had an injury of my foot and I got housebound. And it was like the worst thing ever because I had just been having so much fun, like trying to find new places to shoot. And like, I discovered this new deep sky astrophotography thing and I had this nice lightweight and I couldn't walk for quite a while actually. So what do you do when you're stuck at home? You become an armchair astrophotographer and you watch more YouTube and you think you're even more knowledgeable than you really are. And you have even more unjustified confidence. And I watched so much YouTube trying to figure out like how I could, because I wanted better results. I was seeing everybody getting these amazing pictures and how do I get pictures like that? I want pictures like that. And so I watched a lot of YouTube and then I started spending money and I ended up with a equatorial mount, a go-to equatorial mount. And I got myself a Takahashi FSQ 106N. And I had been really afraid of jumping into having to use a computer. And I was like, nope, I'll just do it. I'll figure out how to use PhD2 and I'll figure out how to use whatever the other things are. And I kept like, this whole journey, I kept fighting having to like really dive into it completely. And this is where I like really kind of was like giving up. So with a DSLR and a telescope, I started getting big, like there were things I wouldn't have been able to find on my own. And I was able to say, go to this and start taking pictures. I think these are all with a EOS RA Canon, which is how I'm able to get so much hydrogen alpha in some of the, like with the monkey head there. And then I was like, this is cool, I want more. So, so I got a dedicated astrophotography camera and a filter wheel and narrowband filters. I wanted it to be easier than the being out there in the cold with my computer. And right around this time, I think ZWO came out with the ASI Air Pro. And so I got one of those. And luckily I have an understanding wife who knew I was, going a little crazy and needed something to do. So I got away with buying all of this stuff. And once again, and so I'll say at this point, like, once again, this was overconfidence because I thought I could get away with having a smaller mount that didn't have quite the right carrying capacity for the amount of equipment I was putting on it. And it was a great little mount and it actually did amazing. But knowing what I know now, I'm like, wow, I would never do that. Like I would invest in a really good mount that had, the carrying capacity where this would be only half of its carrying capacity so that I could have much better tracking as I was taking pictures. But I was able to get like just things that started blowing my mind again with narrowband imaging. This is all HA with an HA filter from my driveway. And again, I was like, what is all this? This is like amazing. Like, look at the detail I can get. And I started exploring doing processing, narrowband image processing. And it was like, again, I was just like, wow, this is just so beautiful and amazing. And as I got better, not only at shooting it, but also processing it, I started getting just some really great results that were just, like I just kept me in it, just kept me interested, kept me wanting to learn more. And I should say at this point, like, the interesting thing about doing astrophotography and then posting it, which I'm sure you all have run into, is people start asking you questions. And suddenly I was realizing I don't know the answers and I need to figure this out because like everybody asks me questions. So I started really having to like, and I won't be able to articulate it very well right now because my brain is pretty shot, but I was really having to learn a lot more about our universe and how it's made up, and it inspired me to like watch the YouTube videos I started watching were actually about like how is the universe, you know, made up. You know, like UC Santa Cruz has some great lectures on astrophysics, and I started getting into all of that kind of stuff so that I could answer questions when people ask me, because otherwise I just felt, I was like, okay, I don't get to just take pretty pictures anymore. I actually have to know what the heck I'm talking about. So I have, you know, I've definitely had to up my game, and it's been the best. It's been one of the best things that could happen to me, because it's keeping my brain going. So this is actually around the time, this slide is actually about coming to the meeting here with Rogelio, and one of the things he said was like, this darker skies make a difference. The quality of your skies is going to improve the quality of your photographs. And so I was like, okay, like I'm healed up, I can move again. So I started trying to go out to dark sites when I could. So what you see here is there's Pinnacles, there's Fremont Park Observatory. The snowy one is a field just outside of Yosemite. And the last one on the bottom right is at Mercy Hot Springs. And so, and again, this is over time. So some of these are kind of out of sequence of kind of the progression I'm talking about. But darker skies, I found, didn't make a difference. Like, it was just the amount of contrast and detail that I could get out of the photographs was just amazing. This one of M81 and M82 is from Yosemite. It was the middle of a field. I actually left my telescope out there overnight and went back and slept in a cabin and came back the next morning. And this is, I think, only about 2 hours of exposures, which is incredible for the fact that I got IFN in it, which is actually, I'm not going to try and say what IFN means, because my brain isn't tracking very well, but it's basically nebula that's just outside the bounds of our galaxy, that's being lit, integrated flux nebula, that's being lit by the collective light of the stars in our galaxy. So it's an extremely faint dust that you have to have really dark skies to pick up. So when I would process this, I was like I thought I'd done something wrong. Actually, I was like, oh my gosh, what was wrong with my camera? Like, what was going on? Did frost over? What happened? And then I found out that it was a real thing. And again, blown away. Like, one of the things that's been interesting about this is like, when I go to Pinnacles, I'll often have people come up and ask me questions if I'm on the east side where people camp. I've had people come up and ask me questions, and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm taking pictures of space. And they're like, why? And I'm like, well, it's hard to see for us, but the truth is space is full of stuff. And I love taking pictures of that stuff, right? And it's funny because, like, by saying it like that, it actually is very engaging to people. Like, people are like, really? I'm like, yeah, it's like dust and particles and you like, and then, like, you know, like, it gets bound gravitationally and it starts like doing stuff, and you know, like, I've had some really great conversations with people about it. And so yeah, dark skies make a difference, and you just can pick up some details that are amazing, and pull some really beautiful photos out of it.
Yeah. Quick question.
Mm-hmm.
What's a typical, I'll call it, processing time as far as you working on each one, or it just depends?
It depends a little bit. It does depend a little bit on what it is I'm working on. Sometimes I don't do a ton of processing on something if I've gotten really good signal on it, and when I stack it all up, it looks, you know, like just some tweaks makes it pop out. And then there's other things where, like, in order to make it the target that I've chosen show up, I have to do things like create tone mapping. I have to create a starless version and work on just the nebulosity of the nebula, and also like tone down the stars, or just try not to over sharpen the stars because I want the stars to look weird. So that has been a process in and of itself as well, because at first I just wanted like the most amazing, crazy, colorful things ever. And then it was like, wow, that's kind of crazy. I'd actually rather it looked more natural, or like it felt softer. It felt like, you know, there's ways for me that the picture can really evoke a sense of wonder, as opposed to a sense of like, oh, that's crazy, right? Like I want the sense of wonder, not the like, oh, like that's really cool. Like I don't want it to be like my art. I want it to be, no, like that's in the sky. Where? Show me. You know, like that kind of an reaction. So that's been a process. So in my in my progress of doing this, I got into bigger telescopes, which equals bigger problems. But again, it was because, and luckily at this point, I was kind of clued into like the seasons of how the stars are in the sky, and I was like, there's this thing called galaxy season, and the telescopes I had, for those telescopes, you know, like 4-inch refractor, I think was the biggest telescope I had, and its focal length is 530 millimeters. The galaxies were really small. And then I started seeing like these really cool pictures of galaxies, and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And also planets. And so I wanted to be able to get better pictures of galaxies. And so and the first year, I think 2020, I went into galaxy season, and I was like, there's nothing to shoot. Like all the big nebula are gone, unless I want to get up at 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning, and I don't. So and so I kind of missed galaxy season, but I knew that it had happened. So I was like, the next time that comes around, I'll be ready. So I got myself a Celestron Edge HD 11, and I thought, I was kind of worried because I was like, am I gonna like this? Am I gonna really like enjoy it? Because I've been into this nebula and these like crazy shapes. And I started taking pictures of galaxies, and I gotta say, they're my favorite now. Like I love galaxies. I just love that they exist, that like that we're in one, and that there are these other ones out there that you can take a picture of, and all the different forms. And I started studying about galaxies and the different types and the way they're, you know. And so so yeah, this past spring I had a great time taking pictures of galaxies. And another lesson I learned in this process was, when you first start doing it, you do something for like 2 hours, and you're like, I see it, it's amazing, this is awesome. But if you want a really good picture, and I think it's often referred to as having a deep picture, the more time you put into it, the easier it is to pull out the things that you want to see, and the less you have of noise, and the less you have to fight the picture to see the picture. And so most of these are for probably, actually the top row for sure, those are all about 20 hours of exposure time each. And so the bigger telescope, bigger problems part of this is that that's a really big scope, and it needs a really good mount, and it's really hard to get it to track well. And it was a whole nother learning curve to understand how to balance it and how to track with it. And I think if I go back to like the beginning when I was doing this, in my head I was like, I'm good with computer stuff. It'll probably just be plug and play for me. But nothing in this is plug and play. Like the more I understand it, and I'm still learning, by the way, the more I understand it, the better my results are, because I'm not fighting my equipment. I did a lot of fighting with my equipment when I first started. It just would not do what I wanted. It would not track the way I wanted. It would not, you know, it was hard to get round stars, and all of that wasn't the equipment. All of that was me. So I'll try to keep going. I feel like I'm going on a long time. So planets, I got into a little bit last year, and I want to do it more. Planets are hard, a whole nother world of pain. But when you get kind of a good result, it's like the most amazing thing. So yeah, so next year, or this coming year, I'm going to try and do a little bit more planetary imaging.
Yeah.
And I got into solar, which I thought would be really boring, but it's been amazing. Luckily for me, I got into it when we're heading into a solar active period. So what do they call it? Solar maximum or whatever. And I've caught some amazing, there was a flare on I think May 20th. And I really was just happened to be testing out my equipment, and I could see it happening. Like it was the first time I'd done a few things, but I could actually watch the flare move. And I'd never seen that before, because usually things are just so slow that you really have to like image for a long time to see the movement. And this is the flare that's hopefully you see animating. That was about half an hour's worth of imaging. That's an incredible amount of movement for that amount of time. Yeah. So that was really, so this has been like really fun. And lunar, I've done some lunar, and I've done some, I'm lucky, I feel like the ISS has passed across the moon at least twice a year since I've been into imaging. So I've caught it, I've failed a couple of times, and then I finally got a good system down and I was able to catch it. And obviously the eclipses, I think, I didn't catch this last one, but I've caught the 2 previous moons I've been able to image. Just a quick wrap up. Yeah, software acquisition. I started out with Astrophoto tools and PhD to guiding to capture. I use that both for DSLR and for dedicated astro camera. And then I moved to ASIR Pro for almost all my imaging, except for planetary, in which I use SharpCap. For processing, sorry, that was acquisition. So for processing, I currently use AstroPixel processor for stacking and some normalizing of lights and application of darks and flats and dark flats. And I use Photoshop for all the other processing, and Topaz denoise as a plugin to Photoshop for denoising. When I first started, I used Deep Sky Stacker, which is a great application. It's just very bare bones and compared to AstroPixel processor. And then obviously for planetary, SharpCap, Auto Stacker is a I don't know, people may know it. It's a great program for taking a video and turning it into individual files and then stacking like the percentage of them that are the best capture. So if you're doing the moon or the sun and you've got seeing issues, it will actually pick out the best, and planets, it'll actually pick out, you can say like use only 20% of the frames that are the best frames and stack those together. And that's how I got the picture of Jupiter, which when I was looking at capturing it, just looked like a wobbly mess. And then you run it through all these things and suddenly you see the red spot and all of its stripes and all. So, and then for solar, I use Auto Stacker and IMPPG, which is a sharpening tool. So visual astronomy, because I know who I'm talking to. So yeah, visual astronomy. I actually, this is not a picture of me being stupid and looking at the sun with my Dobsonian. This is when Jupiter and Saturn were in conjunction at sunset. And we had a little star party at a friend's house, and I brought my Dobsonian over so that everybody could, it was awesome. And then the other picture was of me showing my mother Saturn for the first time in her life. She's 79. And I was a little worried that she wouldn't be able to see it with the eyepieces I had, but she was actually, so it was a funny story because I kept saying, Mom, do you see it? And she was like, yeah, no, I see it. And I was like, okay, Mom, back away from the eyepiece. Okay, now look at the eyepiece until you see a little bit of light. Now move towards that light. And then she's like, no, I saw it. I'm like, uh-huh. So try this. And she goes, oh my gosh. And so I'm like, now you see it. Right? because that's the reaction. I've done a couple of star party type things with friends and their kids, and you can always tell when someone sees, especially with like Saturn or Jupiter, you can always tell when they see the target you're aimed at, because that reaction happens. And like my friend's 8-year-old daughter started just dancing. She was like, oh, it's amazing, it's amazing. And she would run back and she'd be like, it's, you know, like, because Saturn is such a bizarre thing to see for the first time, really. It's like, it's just such an interesting planet. So anyway, so yes, I do a little bit of visual, but no, I'm not in any way in any of the league of anybody in this club, I'm sure. And so this is me. I have an Instagram and I have a Facebook if you want to check it out. Just if you want to see what I'm shooting. Yeah, that's my presentation. Hopefully that was interesting. That's where I am now. I have a lot of equipment and very little money in the bank, but I'm happy.